Hello, hello. This is Allison Bonello with Allison B Coaching. Today I am going to talk a little bit about trauma from a biblical perspective. We hear the word trauma being tossed around left and right. We hear about big T and little t and how trauma affects the lives of individuals in such a long-lasting way. And my background is as a psychotherapist, but I'm also a Bible study facilitator. And I want to tie the two together a little bit as we talk about trauma today. And I'm going to use a story in Judges about Jephthah, who was one of the judges in the Old Testament for Israel. And for those of you who are really not familiar with the Bible, it's okay. I'm going to give a lot of background, and for those of you who are more familiar with the Bible and who want to go back to the Bible and read the story for yourself, I'm going to be giving you the references so where you could go and where you could read. So this is my first time doing this kind of a video. I ask that you be patient with me because I'm also using this platform, StreamYard, and I'm going to be trying to learn how to do it. So I apologize in advance if this doesn't go very smoothly, but I will do my best attempt to make this valuable and make your time with me valuable. So let's just get into it. And in between the story, I'll be pausing and adding some context that might relate more to present day. So even though this is Old Testament, and I'll try to explain a little bit of the Old Testament language and references, it's also going to relate to things that are going on in the present. That is why this presentation is called Past Pain and Present Problems, the story of Jephthah, which could be found in the Old Testament book of Judges, chapter 11, and we're going to be going through verses 1 through 40. Okay, so let's just get into it and see how it goes. Let's see, I have the slides loaded up, and let's go into it. Oh, let me just start off by saying the book of Judges is really a historical book about the various judges that ruled Israel in the past. And many of them reigned long years, and quite many of them ruled very short years. The story of Judges is really about God's attempt to help the people of Israel follow him and follow him consistently. So you will see stories about different individuals. And this one story relates to Jephthah, who is just one of a long line of judges who ruled over Israel. We'll find out how he came to be a judge, and we'll find out a little bit more about him, and you'll see the connection to past pain and present problems. Okay, so let's start off with who is Jephthah. Jephthah is talked about in Judges 11 verses 1 through 3. Judges chapter 11 verses 1, 2, and 3. And we're going to break it down a little bit, and you're going to see how he is connected to family, friends, and how what goes on in his life is impactful in his future. Now, before I even go talk about him, let me talk a little bit about trauma. As a therapist, I worked with many people who struggled with traumatic events in their past and sometimes in their present. And they reflected a lot on the choices that they were making in the present, many of them not good choices, many of them consequence and results that really tied back to previous trauma. And when we look at Jephthah, we're going to see that same kind of reflection. We're going to see that he operates in his present related to the way he operates is very much connected to how he started out. You yourself, or you may know some people who are understanding the same thing. The way you are operating now has strong connections to maybe events that have happened in your past. And you may be struggling to figure out, how on earth can I break the cycle? How can I stop my past trauma from so negatively impacting my present? Now, I do want to say, as a side note, trauma does not all the time result in negative presenting issues. There are some people who are able to rise above their trauma. And when I say trauma, it is a significant event that has happened, that has shifted your worldview, that has shifted your relationship between you and the things that are most connected with you. Sometimes trauma affects the way you see yourself, the way you see yourself in the world, the way you value yourself, the way you value the world and other members in your world. Trauma could cause you to value people beyond what is healthy, or it could cause you to devalue people beyond what is healthy. It could cause you to see yourself as maybe greater than is healthy, and it could cause you to see yourself as less important than what is healthy. It shifts, it drastically shifts. And not only does it shift, it becomes a little bit inflexible. It doesn't allow you to make those nuanced shifts. There are times when we should think very highly of ourselves, and there are times when we should be more humble in our view of ourselves. But people who are caught in a traumatic mindset have a hard time shifting. The way they are is the way they are. They're either very grandiose and bombastic, or they're very self-deprecating and see no value or no worth to themselves. They either see the world as totally threatening, or they see the world as totally open to manipulation, and they themselves are the ones who are victorious and others become their victims. So trauma can act in so many different ways. So there's really not one way that trauma operates with everybody. But what we do know is that it kind of locks your mindset and your emotions into one frame of response. So with that as a background, let's talk a little bit about Jephthah, and let's look at what the Bible has to say about him. Okay. The Bible goes right into Jephthah's story when it says that Jephthah was Gilead. Jephthah the Gilead was a mighty man of valor, but he was the son of a harlot. Wow, what a great first sentence. We know he's a mighty man of valor, but he's the son of a harlot. So many times we're defined by our parentage, right? Son of a harlot, and Gilead begot Jephthah. Gilead is his father, who is head of the tribe called Gilead. Okay, so Gilead's wife, wait a second, we got a harlot, now we've got a wife. Now the wife and the harlot are not the same thing, all right? So verse 2 says, Gilead's wife bore sons, not one, it says sons, plural. And when his wife's sons grew up, they drove Jephthah out and said to him, you shall have no inheritance in our father's house, for you are the son of another woman. All right, so we already see that Jephthah's father had him first and brought him home to be reared in the household of Gilead. Now, why would that happen if you already had a wife? Well, you have to understand in the Old Testament, having sons was something that was very much revered. And I could only read between the lines a little bit and say that probably the only reason Gilead was brought home to be raised in, Jephthah was brought home to be raised by Gilead and Gilead's household was because Gilead's wife had no children at the time that Jephthah was born. So picture this. Jephthah does this thing with a harlot. For those of you who don't know what a harlot is a prostitute. And she says, hey, I'm turning up pregnant with your child. He finds out it's the son. His wife, up to that point, probably has not given him any children, and he thinks, well, better something than nothing. So he, I don't know, maybe he pays off the harlot, maybe not, who knows the backstory. Somebody needs to do a movie on that. But he says, well, let me collect my son. And he brings the son home, and he says to his wife, you don't have any sons for me, so here's going to be my son. So I'm going to have an inheritance, somebody to leave everything to. We're going to raise him up. Well, somewhere along the line, she ends up getting pregnant. Not once, but at least twice to what we know. Well, once she has her son, she doesn't need this child of a prostitute anymore. Her husband doesn't need that. So her children are the legitimate heirs. Even though Jephthah is the oldest child, he is the illegitimate child. And as long as Gilead has legitimate children, he doesn't need this illegitimate child. So I want you to kind of put your mindset into what it might have looked like for Jephthah. At some point, he was probably treated well because he was going to inherit. Then when Gilead's wife had a legitimate heir, do you think they continued to treat him well? I suspect not. And as Gilead's wife bore not one son, she bore heir and a spear. You know, she bore one son, and she even bore a second son. So now Gilead's inheritance, his legacy is definitely going to continue between these through these children. I imagine for each child that Gilead's wife had, Jephthah's treatment became worse and worse because he moved further along down the inheritance line, if he got any inheritance at all. But we see that when they grew up, now remember Jephthah is the oldest son, so as they're growing up, he's growing up too, so he's always going to be older than his brothers, his half siblings. They said, you have no inheritance in our father's house. You are the son of another woman. Well, why would they say that? They could only say that because Gilead had died. So once Gilead had died, we don't know if these young men were in their teens or their young adulthood, but we know they were older. I imagine maybe they were in their late teens, early young adulthood, maybe 20s. And they said, you got to go. So then Jephthah fled from his brothers and dwelt in the land of Tob, which is a neighboring village. And worthless men banded together with Jephthah and went out raiding with him. So that is our introduction to Jephthah. He gets kicked out of his home, his house of origin, where I suspect he was not treated well early on. As soon as Gilead's wife started having children, and then once Gilead died, they totally disinherited him, kicked him out, said, you're the son of a prostitute. We are the legitimate heirs. We are the legitimate kids. You're gone. And he ran off to a place locally. He didn't go too far from his home where he had grown up. And he got into a gang. So that became his new family. And what did they do? They stole and they robbed people and they raided. And that's how they survived. So that becomes Jephthah's new reality. Contrast that with growing up as the son of the leader of a Jewish tribe. Even though I suspect he wasn't treated well in his home of origin, his biological family's home, I believe he got access, and you'll see later on why I believe that. I think he got access to the education and all the things that would be befitting a son of the leader, a son of a high-ranking person in the tribe. So he went from being the son, even though an illegitimate son of the high-ranking official, the leader of the tribe, to being basically a scoundrel and a scallywag and a gang member in a neighboring town where he's out doing criminal activities. And that's what he did for survival. All right. With that being said, we're going to talk more about Jephthah, but I wanted to start off with who was Jephthah. Can you identify maybe some trauma that if you were a therapist and he walked in your door, would you say that he had legitimate grounds to claim trauma? I would, because I've seen many people with Jephthah's background where they came from families that did not value them. They came from families that maybe abused and neglected them. They have issues of abandonment in their past. And when I meet individuals like that, sometimes they have diagnoses of PTSD, attachment disorder, and depression, anxiety, so many different things, all related to not being nurtured in their early life, not being protected, not being provided for in a way that denotes love and acceptance. So when you meet people like that, what do you think they need? What do you think someone with a background like Jephthah might possibly need? Well, we're going to talk more about that and delve into that a little bit more on our next video. So hang in there, tune in. We're going to talk about past pain and present problems. But it's going to be a hopeful thing too. So we're not going to leave it on a negative, because my God is a God of restoration. My God does not leave you where he found you. If there are things that are going on in your life that you've experienced that are causing you to feel stuck in patterns and loops of behavior that are unhealthy, I want you to know that this story is going to be very encouraging to you. And I hope that you do check back to find out more about Jephthah's situation and how it's handled in past pain and present problems. All right, so this is Allison Bonilla, and I look forward to talking to you more on our next video. I'll see you then. If you like this and you want more content like this, please like, subscribe, and share. Thank you for hanging in there with me. And I'm going to be making some more videos, and we're going to take this all the way through from Judges chapter 11, verse 1, and we're going to go all the way through 40, and we're even going to go into the New Testament a little bit with Jephthah, because, okay, I'm going ahead of myself. Just check back and you'll see what I'm talking about. Bye. Bye for now.